They didn't erase this method because it was illegal. They didn't suppress it because it was dangerous to the public. They buried it because it worked too fast. And when something works too fast, it threatens systems built on slow dependency. You're about to hear about a psychological protocol that was never meant to go public. It wasn't designed for comfort. It wasn't created for healing circles or motivational conferences. It was built in quiet rooms, behind closed doors, during experiments that never made it into textbooks. One session. That's all it took. One session with this method exposed more truth than years of analysis ever could. Not surface truth. Not polished truth. Not therapeutic truth. Raw truth. The kind that cracks your identity open. The kind that doesn't ask permission before it changes you. And when researchers saw what was happening, when they watched people access memories they had never reported in decades of therapy, the tone shifted. This wasn't progress. This was reconfiguration. Subjects weren't processing. They were transforming. And transformation that rapid doesn't just change behavior. It changes who you think you are. That's when the files disappeared. That's when sessions were canceled. That's when the phrase "do not proceed" started appearing in internal notes. Let me be clear. This technique wasn't banned because it harmed people. It was banned because it removed illusion. And illusion is profitable. Illusion keeps you searching. Illusion keeps you confused. Illusion keeps you manageable. This method destroyed illusion in a single confrontation. Tonight, I'm going to show you what that confrontation looks like. But understand something before we go further. If you truly absorb what I'm about to explain, if you don't just listen but recognize yourself in it, you will not finish this video as the same person who started it. You'll either shut it off halfway, or you'll lean in. There is no middle ground with this kind of knowledge. Two worlds live inside you. Inside you right now, there are two parallel worlds operating at the same time. The first world is polished. It smiles. It explains itself. It justifies. It narrates. It says things like, "I'm just stressed. I've always been this way. I don't do relationships well. I'm not emotional. I don't trust easily." That's the surface world. It's articulate. It sounds reasonable. It even sounds self-aware. But it's curated. It's rehearsed. It's the version of you that learned how to survive socially. Underneath that world is another one. Silent, unfiltered, unrehearsed. That's where the real programming lives. Not your opinions, not your preferences, your programming. You think you choose who you fall for. But your nervous system is scanning for familiarity. You think you just get angry. But your body is replaying stored threat patterns. You think you're independent. But maybe you were taught that vulnerability equals punishment. You think you're ambitious. But maybe you're running from a belief that you're only worthy when you achieve. That second world doesn't speak in explanations. It speaks in reactions. It speaks in impulses. It speaks in tension in your chest when someone says something harmless. It speaks in withdrawal when someone gets too close. It speaks in overachievement when silence feels dangerous. Most people live their entire lives in the surface world, decorating it, improving it, optimizing it. They read books about confidence. They watch videos about productivity. They attend workshops about relationships, but they never access the file underneath. And without accessing the file, they are upgrading the mask, not the code. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You are not confused about who you are. You are disconnected from where you were programmed. And that programming didn't happen randomly. It happened in moments, specific moments. Moments that felt too intense to process at the time. Moments when you were too young, too overwhelmed, too unsupported, too shocked. Your brain did what it was designed to do. It protected you. It stored the experience. It created a belief to make sense of it. And it moved on. But it didn't delete it. It archived it. And that archive is what we're calling the black file. The origin of the black file. In the early 1980s, trauma research began moving into experimental territory, not mainstream therapy, not clinical conferences. Underground research groups. Behavioral scientists and trauma specialists who were frustrated with slow progress. They noticed something. Clients could talk for years. They could articulate childhood events. They could intellectually understand their patterns. But behavior didn't change. Reactions didn't change. Identity didn't change. So they asked a different question. What if the problem isn't lack of awareness? What if the problem is that the awareness never reaches the original coding point? That's when deep retrieval protocols were born. Structured psychological confrontations designed to bypass narrative filters. No visualization gimmicks. No fantasy exercises. Just direct interruption of conscious storytelling. The goal wasn't comfort. The goal was access. Access to the exact moment a belief was installed. Access to the emotional blueprint that shaped identity. One report described a subject who had been in therapy for over 15 years. 15 years. They had processed trauma. They had journaled. They had analyzed. But during one structured retrieval session, something shifted. The subject accessed a memory they had never mentioned. Not because they were hiding it, because they didn't consciously remember it. When it surfaced, the reaction wasn't mild. It wasn't reflective. It was destabilizing. They didn't just cry. They reinterpreted their entire identity. The margin note on the file read, "Emotional collapse followed by identity reconfiguration. Technique prohibited in future sessions." Identity reconfiguration. Think about that. Not symptom relief. Not emotional regulation. Reconfiguration. They didn't improve. They changed. That's when caution replaced curiosity. Because when someone sees the root code of their identity, they stop operating the same way. And unpredictable people are difficult to manage. Why it was really suppressed. Officially, the method was described as too destabilizing, too intense, too abrupt. Unofficially, it was too final. Most therapeutic models are built on gradual trust, gradual exploration, gradual integration. There is safety in slowness. This technique had no patience for slowness. It bypassed rapport. It bypassed narrative rehearsal. It bypassed emotional cushioning. It went straight to the fracture. And when you expose the fracture directly, something happens. Excuses collapse. Blame collapses. Victim narratives collapse. Not in a cruel way, in a clarifying way. Imagine realizing that your fear of abandonment isn't random. It began in a specific moment. A moment when you felt emotionally invisible. Imagine realizing that your need for control didn't come from strength. It came from chaos you couldn't stabilize as a child. Imagine understanding that your attraction to emotionally unavailable people isn't fate. It's familiarity. Once someone sees that clearly, they don't need constant interpretation. They don't need someone else to decode them. They've accessed the source. And once you access source code, you don't need endless patch updates. You rebuild the system. That kind of independence shortens dependency cycles. And anything that shortens dependency cycles is rarely encouraged. What's in your black file? Let's strip away the mythology. Your black file isn't dramatic. It's precise. It contains moments you rarely think about but never fully forgot. Beliefs you assume are personality traits. Emotional reflexes that feel automatic. Unspoken conclusions you made about yourself and the world. Here's how programming happens. You experience something overwhelming. Your nervous system activates. You feel shock, shame, fear, rejection, humiliation, or abandonment. Your brain asks one question: what does this mean? The answer becomes belief. I'm not safe. I'm not enough. Emotion equals weakness. Love is unstable. I have to perform to matter. People leave. I shouldn't need anyone. You don't consciously choose these beliefs. They install themselves in survival mode, and once installed, they begin filtering reality. You interpret neutral events through that lens. You respond to harmless situations as if they carry old danger. You create patterns that confirm the belief, not because you're broken, because you're consistent. The black file is the collection of those original installations. It explains why you sabotage closeness. It explains why compliments make you uncomfortable. It explains why success feels hollow. It explains why certain arguments trigger disproportionate reactions. And most importantly, it explains why you feel confused about yourself. You are not inconsistent. You are running layered programming. And until you see it, you will keep mistaking it for personality. The cost of clarity. Before we move forward, understand this clearly. Opening your black file is not empowerment theater. It's confrontation. You might discover parts of yourself that you don't like. You might realize you've manipulated situations to avoid vulnerability. You might see that some of your strength was actually fear in disguise. You might recognize patterns you blamed on other people were reactions to your own unresolved coding. That level of honesty doesn't feel inspiring. It feels destabilizing. Because clarity removes excuses, and once excuses disappear, responsibility begins. That's why most people stay on the surface. Not because they're incapable, because illusion feels safer than responsibility. But if you're still here, listening, leaning in instead of backing away, it means something in you is ready. Ready to stop decorating the mask. Ready to access the code. Ready to understand instead of react. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly how this technique was structured. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, directly, step by step. But once you start, you don't stop halfway. Because once you've seen the file, you can't unsee it. And the person who understands their own programming is no longer predictable, no longer manipulatable, no longer operating blind. That's when confusion ends and power begins. The Black File Access Protocol. Now we leave theory. Now we move into application. This is where most people turn the video off. Because hearing about buried psychological code is fascinating. Accessing it is different. Let me say this clearly before we begin. This is not a self-help exercise. This is not journaling for clarity. This is internal reconnaissance. And if you follow this correctly, you will feel something shift. Not motivation, not inspiration, exposure. There is a reason your mind buried certain moments. Not because you're weak. Because at the time, you were overwhelmed. Your brain sealed the file for survival. We are not ripping it open recklessly. We are unlocking it deliberately. If you are emotionally unstable right now, if you are severely sleep deprived, if you are in active crisis, do not attempt this. This requires stability. Because once the memory surfaces, your body may react before your logic does. That's normal. That means you've reached something real. Now we begin. The 5 shifts you'll experience. After accessing your black file, expect 5 psychological shifts. The first shift is narrative collapse. The stories you used to tell yourself start feeling hollow. I'm just not emotional. That line doesn't land the same anymore. I don't trust people. Now you see the moment that created that belief. The narrative dissolves. And without narrative, identity feels unstable. The second shift is emotional resurfacing. Random memories pop up. Smells trigger flashes. Certain phrases hit harder than usual. You're not regressing. Your subconscious is reorganizing. It's reviewing related files. Not to overwhelm you, to integrate. The third shift is social dissonance. Conversations feel shallow. Performative behavior becomes obvious. You may feel disconnected from people you once felt aligned with, not because you've become superior, because you've stopped performing coherence. The fourth shift is timeline reinterpretation. You start replaying your life differently. You don't just remember events, you see patterns. You recognize how one belief shaped multiple decisions, how one fracture influenced entire chapters. This can feel overwhelming, but it's actually clarity consolidating. The fifth shift is isolation, not depression, isolation. You may feel the need to pull back, to observe, to recalibrate. That is normal. You are detoxing from a version of yourself that was partially constructed in reaction to a buried wound. The identity void. Here's the dangerous part. When you dismantle an illusion, there's a gap before you construct something new. That gap is the identity void. And the identity void is uncomfortable, because humans don't like uncertainty about who they are. You might ask, if that belief wasn't me, then who am I? That question is powerful. But if you rush to answer it with another borrowed identity, you rebuild another mask. The goal isn't to immediately replace the old story. The goal is to act differently before you define differently. Behavior rewires belief, not the other way around. What power actually looks like. After 60 to 90 days of integration, changes accelerate. You notice emotional manipulation faster. You detect projection. You recognize when someone is speaking from their own unprocessed file. And instead of reacting, you observe. Observation replaces impulsivity. You feel less triggered. Not because nothing affects you, because you understand why it affects you. Understanding creates space. Space creates control. Control creates power. Not dominance over others. Dominance over yourself. And here's something most people won't admit. When you stop reacting blindly, people notice. They may say you've changed. They may say you're colder. They may say you're different. They're not describing your personality. They're describing your immunity. You're no longer hooked, no longer easily manipulated, no longer performing roles you never chose. That's not cold. That's calibrated. Why this makes you unpredictable. Most people operate from unconscious scripts. Their reactions are predictable. Their triggers are visible. Their defense systems are automatic. When you understand your own code, you disrupt that predictability. You choose responses deliberately. You don't chase validation. You don't crumble under rejection. You don't explode to protect ego. You evaluate. You decide. And that makes you difficult to control, because control relies on predictability. Once you see your file, you cannot be emotionally steered the same way. That is mental sovereignty. Not hype. Not motivation. Sovereignty. The real danger. The real danger of the black file technique isn't emotional collapse. It's independence. When you understand your own architecture, you stop blaming. You stop projecting. You stop saying, I don't know why I'm like this. You know. And knowing removes victimhood. Without victimhood, there is responsibility. Without responsibility, there is no power. This technique was buried, not because it harms individuals, but because it produces individuals who cannot be easily manipulated. And a person who cannot be manipulated becomes unpredictable, and unpredictable people reshape environments. Final thought before the next step. You made it through the confrontation. You opened the file. You decoded the belief. You saw the fracture. Now the question is simple. Will you integrate? Or will you pretend you never saw it? Most people close the notebook and go back to autopilot. They feel exposed. They feel shaken. And they retreat. But if you continue, if you commit to behavioral reconstruction, if you consciously install identity instead of inheriting it, you will not just feel different. You will operate differently. And operation is what changes outcomes. In the next chapter, we go beyond integration. We move into application in the real world. How to use clarity in relationships. How to use it in conflict. How to use it in ambition. Because power without direction becomes isolation. But power with direction becomes leverage. You opened the file. Now we talk about what you can do with it. And once you see that, there's no going back. You were never supposed to find this. You weren't supposed to see this. Most people won't make it this far. They click away when it stops being entertaining and starts being personal. But you didn't. You stayed. And that tells me something about you. You're not here for comfort. You're here for clarity. There's a difference. Comfort keeps you functioning. Clarity changes you. And if you actually did what I told you, if you actually opened that notebook, if you actually wrote the belief, then you already feel it. That subtle shift, that quiet tension, that strange mix of discomfort and control. That's awareness. And awareness is irreversible. You can't unknow what you just saw. You can't go back to "I don't know why I'm like this." You do know. And now, the responsibility is yours. If this video shifted you, if something in this video hit deeper than you expected, if you felt seen in ways that made you uncomfortable, if you caught yourself thinking, "That's exactly me," then you're already in the process. And here's what I want you to do. In the comments, write this: "I've seen the file." Nothing else. No explanation. No story. Just that. The ones who understand will understand. And I read every comment because I know who's actually doing the work and who's just watching for entertainment. This channel is not for everyone. Darkmind 999 isn't motivation. It isn't positivity. It isn't dopamine. This is psychological warfare against your own limitations. Every video here is built to dismantle illusion, to expose mental blind spots, to make you sharper, colder when necessary, smarter always. If you want comfort, there are thousands of channels for that. If you want control, you're in the right place. So subscribe. Not because it's trendy, but because once you start this process, you don't stop halfway. You either evolve or you revert. And reverting is harder once you've seen the truth. Before you leave, don't scroll. Don't break the state. Your brain is open right now. Neuroplasticity is highest when emotion is activated, and this conversation activated something. The next video on your screen? Watch it. Not tomorrow. Now. Because when you stack awareness back to back, integration accelerates, momentum compounds, and hesitation disappears. You've already cracked the door. Don't close it. Push it open. Keep going. Because once you access the black file, there is no neutral ground. You either become the architect of your identity, or you remain a product of your programming. Choose carefully. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp. Stay controlled. Stay dangerous.